Please take a second to subscribe, then like and share afterwards. We can really use your support. Thank you. Welcome to our new series called Prophecies Uncovered. If you haven't seen our previous series, Evidence Uncovered, we encourage you to watch all 22 episodes that uncover the evidence from each of the major epochs of the Bible, including the creation, the Great Flood, the Exodus, and so much more. Now, we felt a calling to create this new series that delves deep into some of the biblical prophecies that have and are now taking place that you may never have heard before. Like the previous series, Prophecies Uncovered will certainly set out to uncover a whole new area of evidence that will challenge any skeptic who questions God's existence, because none of what you are about to hear could have possibly taken place without a divine hand to oversee it all. If you ever thought to yourself why God was so actively part of the events of the Old Testament, yet now extremely silent and inactive in our present time, you'll discover that he is indeed just as active today than he ever was. And this will be demonstrated for you through ancient prophecy. There is an ancient blueprint from over 3,000 years ago that holds a secret to the events of our modern times. We are going to blow the secret wide open to reveal this ancient revelation, a revelation to the mysteries that have determined the course of empires and superpowers, kings and presidents. This series will unravel each of them as we move along. Get ready as we are about to embark to get these prophecies uncovered. Human history is not a series of random events, chance occurrences, or accidents. It is not meaningless with no purpose. This history that has passed, history that is currently being written, and our yet unwritten future have God's fingerprints all over it. The mystery reveals the threads to the master loom. These threads are being found inside the pages of our Bible, yet most people have no idea they are there, even after reading over the scriptures countless times. They were written by prophets. Until now, we've understood that they spoke of the ancient times, with only a few that speak of the end times. However, they have been also speaking of our modern times that provide so much detail that we've somehow managed to miss them. In this first episode, we begin with the nation of Israel. According to the ancient scriptures of the Old Testament, God made a covenant with Abraham, a descendant of Shem, who was a son of Noah. God chose him to be the father or head of God's chosen people. He would make Abraham a great nation and bless them. This nation would become the nations of Israel and Judah, and it was here that God made a promise that stands to this day. Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. This promise would be renewed through the lines of Isaac and Jacob, who would be renamed Israel. God then iterated to Abraham the very first prophecy regarding his nation of people before their very existence. He stated that his descendants will become strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. This is the reference to this people who would become enslaved in Egypt. God then reveals that he would deliver them out of enslavement and be given the promised land by the 4th generation. It is no secret to most of us familiar to the account. However, this is when it goes even deeper. Moving forward to the events leading to the final stages of the Exodus bringing the people to the Promised Land, Moses is about to deliver his farewell address near the River Jordan. He is not going to make it across into the Promised Land, but instead will hand the reins over to Joshua and address the people with this following prophecy. In Moses' hand during his address was the scroll he had written that contains what would become known as the Torah. the first 5 books of the Old Testament. He began reading from the scroll just as it has been read by the Jewish people throughout the ages to follow. The words would become the last words of Moses before his death. The words he was reading from the latter part of the scroll was actually a prophetic word of what was going to happen to them in the centuries and ages to come. He was reading from Deuteronomy. It was foretelling that the land of Israel would be invaded by an enemy and that the Jewish people would be taken captive into the nations. They would be scattered from one end of the earth to the other. It was a prophetic warning to keep and observe all of the words of the law given by God, and for not observing the law and to follow God with all of their hearts, the scattering would take place. As for the first serious warning, God removed them from their promised land temporarily when the Babylonians invaded 5th century BC. They destroyed the holy city of Jerusalem and took the people captive into exile in Babylon. Take note that this exile would last for 70 years until the rise of the Persian king Cyrus, who would allow them to return to their land. Again, we already know these details, but it is extremely important to lay this all out in order for what we will soon reveal to make sense. God had to have the people back in their own land with Jerusalem rebuilt on time for the Messiah to arrive. The prophesied life, ministry, death, resurrection, and ascension had to take place in order to establish the new covenant with both Jew and Gentile for salvation to be possible for all people. But then, the scattering across the earth would be fulfilled in its entirety in the second exile. It would begin in the year 70 AD. This time, it would be the armies of Rome that would destroy Jerusalem and drive the people into exile, not to one place, but to the ends of the earth. And not for 70 years like that in Babylon, but nearly for the next 2,000 years. As with the prophecy, they would be prosecuted from nation to nation and wander the earth as no one else before. The mystery begins in the law of Jubilees. Here we find a connection to this prophetic words of, "You shall return," to the shofar or ram's horn. According to the law of Jubilees, if you lost your home, your land, the land of your family, your ancestral possession and inheritance, you would get it all back in the year of the Jubilee. Each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. Leviticus 25:10. In the year of Jubilee, you come home. Your family comes home. Your separation from your land is ended. It is a year of restoration. The land is restored to the original owner. The book of Leviticus is Moses' 3rd book, and it is the book of the law, and it contains the law of Jubilee. The ram's horn, or shofar, was the sign of the Jubilee. It was the horn that ushered it in and proclaimed its coming throughout the land. A Jubilee occurs every 50 years. It is the 50th year, and whether you are alive or not, you and your descendants would retake possession and ownership of the land. The Jubilee was given to the land of Israel at the time it was read to them by Moses. Therefore, the mystery of the Jubilee would begin to play out before the world as the time came. We may be familiar with Israel's return in recent times, but very few understand the details and how they played out. Moses continued the prophecy. The Lord your God will bring you back from captivity and have compassion on you, and gather you again from all the nations where the Lord your God has scattered you. Deuteronomy 30:3. Not only would it be fulfilled, but it would be unprecedented, and the details of which will become so incredible it will be too impossible to ignore. Moses then said this: The stranger that shall come from a far land shall say, when they see the plagues of that land, and the sicknesses which the Lord hath laid upon it, and that the whole land thereof is brimstone and salt and burning, that it is not sown, nor beareth, nor any grass groweth therein, like the overthrown of Sodom and Gomorrah. Deuteronomy 29:22-23. This begins the mystery of the stranger. It is a prophecy of a stranger that will come from a faraway land to witness the barren, devastated desolation of this land. It would be many centuries after the people were scattered, giving plenty of time for the land to become a total wasteland. The prophecy uses the term akaron, meaning the latter or last days of desolation. It is the end time of their captivity. The event is foretold in the same passage. The Lord your God will bring you back from captivity and have compassion on you, and gather you again from all the nations where the Lord your God has scattered you. Deuteronomy 30:3. The prophecy of the stranger leads into the prophecy of the regathering of the Jewish people. The stranger will be a sign that the exile is about to end. That prophecy can now be uncovered. The stranger would come from San Francisco. This prophecy required someone to bring forth words of testimony, so he would be a man of words, a writer. The stranger was Mark Twain, the very Mark Twain who wrote Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Twain was a skeptic of the Bible, therefore a powerful witness. He was a journalist who heard of a journey across the world on a steamship called Quaker City. It would be among the first ships to undertake such a voyage. Appointed to bear witness, he would keep a notebook throughout the journey to record his observations. According to the prophecy, he was to bear witness of the plagues of that land and all its sicknesses. Now listen to the words of Twain concerning what he saw. Rags, wretchedness, poverty, and dirt, lepers, cripples, the blind, to see the numbers of maimed, malformed, and diseased humanity that throng the holy places. The prophecy also says he would describe the land as a desolation. He would say, "The whole land is brimstone, salt, all desolate and unpeopled, miles of desolate country, the far-reaching desolation." The prophecy foretold that he'd use the terms like a burning waste or a scorching desert. Twain would write, "It is a scorching, arid, repulsive solitude, such roasting heat, dismal desolation, and that in the desert they were scorching to death." The ancient prophecy also foretold that the stranger would say, "Not even a blade of grass." Twain wrote precisely that, "No sprig of grass is visible." Finally, the ancient prophecy said that the curse of God rests upon the land. As an unbeliever, you would not expect Twain to utter such words, yet in fact, he fulfilled the prophetic passage perfectly with this one final line. "Palestine is desolate and unlovely, and why should it be otherwise? Can the curse of the deity beautify a land?" Remember, it was necessary for the stranger to bear witness to these things and to that generation, and it did just that. All these words would appear in articles across America and beyond. He would bear witness to multitudes of his generation and thus fulfill the prophecy. He had to witness its desolation prior to the return of the Jewish people to set the stage for the moving of God's hand and the impossible for a miracle to take place. Twain's visit to the Holy Land took place in 1867, a very significant year. But first, we need to take a look at the mystery of the measuring line as spoken of by the prophet Zechariah. "Then I raised my eyes and looked, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. So I said, 'Where are you going?' And he said to me, 'To measure Jerusalem, to see what is its width and what is its length.'" This is extremely crucial to the prophecy. The man with the measuring line appeared to Zechariah in the days when the people of Israel had returned from their exile in Babylon to the land, but hadn't yet seen the fullness of God's promised restoration. Why the measuring line? It means they are about to rebuild. It is a sign of God's future purposes to rebuild Jerusalem. In the Jubilee, the original owner returns to his land. What happens when you return to a land? What has to be produced in order to take possession of it? A title, a deed, a survey. The land must be defined or redefined its measurements. If there is no existing survey, then one must be made, thus the measuring line. Therefore, Zechariah's vision of the man with the measuring line was a sign of the return of the exiled people. This ancient sign would again have to manifest in the modern time for their return from the ends of the earth. His appearance would be a sign of what was yet to come, and it indeed happened without anyone really planning for it to unfold. Next up, in part 2 of the Return of Israel, we will reveal the identity of the modern man with the measuring line, and much more, here on Prophecies Uncovered.